Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Alden Mills. Alden is a best-selling author and keynote speaker. He is a former Navy SEAL platoon commander, Division I athlete, and co-founder and CEO of Perfect Fitness. He is the author of Unstoppable Teams, the 4 Essential Actions of High-Performance Leadership. I am excited to have him on the show to learn how to create unstoppable teams. So Alden, welcome to the show.
John, it's great to be here, and I love what you're doing with deep leadership.
Well, thanks. It's an honor to have you on the show. I'm excited to hear your story, to learn from you. Your journey as a Navy SEAL, an entrepreneur, and now in the speaking world and writing world. So I'm excited to hear your journey and really share what you've learned over that journey with our listeners. So start us off. Tell us a little bit about your background. As I understand it, you overcame childhood asthma to become a nationally ranked rower and eventually a Navy SEAL. What drove you throughout your youth? And then why did you want to become a Navy SEAL in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you that I'll answer the first question, the last question first here. Becoming a Navy SEAL, that was a natural extension of the sport I was doing. The bigger question is, like, okay, what drove me? Like, how did I, an asthmatic kid, and you want more details? I was terrible at ball sports. I mean, here's a kid who scored against his own team on basketball, lacrosse, soccer, and hockey. And oh, by the way, I found out I was asthmatic and also born with smaller than average size lungs. And I found that all out in one fateful day when I was 12, going to the big city of Worcester, Massachusetts, with my mom, who grew up in a small town in central Mass. And, the doctor was very, very kind of nonchalant. He's like, here's his problem. He's asthmatic and he's got smaller than average size lungs. He needs to learn the game of chess and lead a less active lifestyle. Right.
Wow.
And I remember going, oh my God, how am I going to learn the game of chess? I suck at checkers. Like, this isn't going to work. And my mom was the one talking about deep leadership that really kind of gave me my first leadership experience. And that was, hey, we'll go get you the medicine, but no one defines what you can or can't do but you. You get to decide. It's up to you. It's your choice. So what are you going to do? Do you want to learn chess or do you want to go try a sport? And of course, I didn't get it that day or I didn't get that much, but the consistency of, so what if you scored on your own team in basketball? Go try another sport. Go try another sport. And those attempts got me to try out rowing, 8 oars in a boat, sitting on your butt, going backwards for a long period of time. That was transformative, and that helped me go to the Naval Academy. And while at the Naval Academy, I knew I had to serve afterwards. And I was like, well, where's a place that is most similar to the sport of rowing? And I found SEAL Team. So the real initial snowball event was Mom.
Interesting. So you're faced with, and again, we're going to talk about this throughout the show, you're faced with an obstacle at a young age. And what you're saying is it didn't stop you from pursuing whatever you're interested in doing.
Yeah. You make it sound, and I mean this in the positive light, like, oh, you had this obstacle. And I'm on the speaking circuit and I talk to lots of audiences about, yeah, we all have this obstacle. You may not have smaller lungs or asthma, but maybe you have nearsightedness. Maybe it's a physical ailment. Maybe it's a mental ailment. Maybe it's a attention ailment. Maybe it's a I can't do it ailment, right? We all have these obstacles. And, I think Mom's opinion was like, hey, it's either going to be an obstacle or an opportunity. How are you going to deal with it? Well, it turns out, for a large majority of asthmatics, and I don't mean this for everybody, but you can, with intense physical exercise and training, you can really put that in check. And if you really look at ways to look at the gift of how to overcome that obstacle, that can really propel you forward.
Mm.
And so I encourage people, like we're always running into obstacles. Yeah, I'll give you a very recent obstacle. I had heart failure 2 months ago.
Mm.
I'm
Wow.
training for, I'm on the 7 Summit kick, and I was going to train to ski to the South Pole, and I collapsed. Turns out I had an inflamed heart. Not an obstacle I was expecting.
Mm.
And, you know, is it going to stop you, or is it like, oh, okay, well, we can slow down for a little while, take some meds, figure out what it is, and then figure out new ways to take control? We are going to run into those obstacles throughout the rest of our lives. The question will be, is it an obstacle or is it an opportunity?
Mm. Yeah, I like that what you said there. And how that mindset and what you went through to get into the academy and then get into the SEAL teams, what in your experiences when you were in the SEAL teams, how did those experiences help you in your next endeavor, which is ends up being an entrepreneur and leading a startup company? What are some things you learned throughout your time in the military and even in the academy that that helped you for the rest of the things that you did in your life?
Let's start with the academy. The academy was the best of times and the worst of times.
Yes.
Charles Dickens' story, right? And let me explain to you why it was the worst of times for me. It was the worst of times for me because that was the first time in my life I failed a class.
Mm,
And then I failed another one. And
mm,
then I got a D in performance. And I got failing grades and uh, room inspections. And I failed almost everything I could fail there at one shape. And I wasn't used to failing. And all of a sudden, I had come from being, I'd say, a medium sized fish, but in a small pond. And I'm in the pond where there are much bigger fish than me at the Naval Academy. And they were way better at things that I thought, well, I could be good at all this stuff. And it turns out I wasn't. And it took me a little while to really come to grips with the fact that, hey, it's okay. You're not going to be great at a bunch of things, but know what you're good at and learn to surround yourself with people who are good at the things you're not good at, which means learn how to build relationships with all kinds of different people. And that was one of the great things of the Naval Academy. It is a great cross section of America, right? It's all 50 states and provinces, regions around the world that are associated with the United States are allowed to come to the Naval Academy. All socioeconomic backgrounds were there. And I really got to learn what I was good at and a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't great at. And I learned how to build the first real teams at the Naval Academy. So that's part one. And then when you go to SEAL team, man, does SEAL team teach you a lot about yourself just in training. And one of the great things it teaches me, and I talk about it uh, in my second book, is we all have this conversation, a conversation that's going on in here, a conversation that I'll call between the whiner and the whisperer. One that's saying all the reasons why we can't do something, and the other one that's a lot quieter saying, try again, get up, keep going. You can do it. And when you learn to quiet the whiner and embrace the whisperer, you're learning your weapons platform. And that's a big piece of what they talk about in SEAL team is, you don't get any fancy guns or cool weapons of any sort when you go through SEAL training. The only weapon that they're working on is the one right here. And then the swim buddy between this, and I'm pointing to the heart and the body of the brain housing group, right? The weapons platform is our brain housing group. That's what they would say all the time. The body obeys the brain. It ain't the other way around. And the weapons platform is that connection between the brain and our body. And learning to harness the very few things that we can control is what SEAL training is all about.
Mm.
And I distill those key components, and everything can snowball off of those, but learning to control our thoughts. Our thoughts lead into our emotions and build our attitudes, into our focus, where we decide to put things, and the beliefs that we want to accept.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you're right. And you see a lot of people derailed because of their mind, right? They convince themselves they can't move forward, right? They listen to the whiner, not the whisperer, sometimes, and then they derail themselves. And if you just take that one more step, and just keep going, that's what you need to do to overcome, even the toughest obstacles. That's what I wanted to transition to. You were this amazing entrepreneur. You had this amazing entrepreneurial journey. You developed the perfect fitness line of exercise products, right? I remember the perfect push-up being, ads on TV. So you're that guy that designed that thing, and you brought this company, Perfect Fitness, into the world. And in 3 years, you went from sales of $500,000 to 63 million in 3 years. Tell us a little bit about that story, and what were some of the challenges you faced to getting that level of growth in such a short amount of time?
Oh, we didn't have any challenges. It was perfect. It was super
Okay.
easy, no problems whatsoever. Oh, I was born to be an entrepreneur, overnight success that took 10 years, right? I
Right.
was really clear with everybody in the audience. People would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you're the overnight success. And then I'm like, yeah, but it took 10 years to get there. You didn't
Absolutely. Yeah.
hear I started the first business, PT Metrics, failed miserably. Started Body Rev, failed miserably. And it's with the last 25,000 that's really out of a 1.5 million. It was really my wife's credit cards that it was a Hail Mary. Hey,
Mm,
let's do something that's really simple and super focused, because we had created a Swiss Army knife product before. And we had no idea what we had in our hands. We just knew we were going to keep trying. And I really want to express to everybody. Do we have time to tell a brief story?
absolutely.
So I mentioned briefly, I raised this $1.5 million from 37 of my closest friends and family members, some classmates from the Naval Academy as well. I was very passionate about not letting them down. And I then come out with this wonderful, the greatest fat burning product in the world that no one ever bought, called Body Rev. Um, and I learned $1,475,000 worth of ways not to launch that product. And I go to my 5 investors that were, I thought, the best opportunity to raise a little bit more money. They're all hedge fund guys. And I'm bringing in my new product that I'm going to show them. I'm finally making the pivot after 4 years of
Mm,
working on Body Rev. And they hold up your hand. They go, stop. We don't want to see any new product, Alden. And furthermore, you're not going to get any more money.
mm.
Show you this thing. It's called, see this? It's called a cash flow statement. You don't have any. And you don't even have enough money to pay the manufacturers, the accountants, the lawyers. Yet your business is over. As a matter of fact, it's so over, the only option for you is to go bankrupt.
Mm.
And we recommend you do that right away. Your wife is pregnant with number 3 child at the time. Um, and about, we think you're starting to embarrass yourself. Come on, go get a job. That was a really pivotal moment, because
Wow.
the other product I was showing them was the perfect push-up. And they didn't want to invest in it. I could have flushed them all, by the way. I was getting some advice to do that, but I didn't want to do that. Like everyone wanted, I felt like I had learned off of their dime what not to do, and now I'd figured out what to do. And I came back and I had a small team of 4 people, and I said, we didn't get the money, but we have this opportunity. And here's the opportunity. Imagine what it would be like if in 90 days, this little gizmo, holding up a functional model Perfect Pushup. Imagine if this takes off and becomes the product we were hoping to build from we know what's going to happen if we go behind the bankruptcy door. We can see very clearly where our lives are going to go. But imagine if we just go 90 more days. 87 days later, we launched the Perfect Pushup. Now, we had a whole host of issues after that, right? Going and scaling an inventory business from $500,000, and by the way, a large majority of that $500,000 came from the body rub product, because we only launched Perfect Pushup in September of 2006. So that's really 2.5 years that we went to 63 million. And we could have done more, but we didn't have any more product.
Yeah.
Right. And you're talking about hundreds of truckloads of moving, and we're drinking from a fire hose, and we're making all kinds of mistakes. And no sooner do we become the fastest growing consumer products company on the Inc. 500, number 4 overall, that 2009 hits. And now we're looking at the second Great Depression, and I go from hero to zero, and I'm thrown into workout, and they're telling me to go bankruptcy for my second time.
Oh, wow.
And then we sell the business, and I work for the new business, and we grow it up some more. And there was an opportunity to almost go bankrupt another time. And then we sold the business again. So when people say, tell me the story, I'm like, there's a lot more to this story than, Alden may have penned out the idea on a napkin, but it took a total of probably 25 people to bring that product to market.
It's really interesting, because I think you're right. I think we like to hear of the overnight success. Or I see it on Instagram. They'll show a picture of a guy with a fancy car and a private jet behind him, and it says hustle. That's all you got to do is hustle, right? And then you got it, right? And I've been an entrepreneur now for 6 years, and I know what you're going through. It's a roller coaster ride of emotions and wins and losses. And the wins they feel like the greatest thing ever, and the losses just seem
never ending. They seem never ending.
Right, exactly. Like you said, you got to the end many times, to where it's bankruptcy, or do we just try to press forward for another month or so? And people don't understand that's the reality of when you start a business. The guy with the private jet in the fancy car with the hustle, that's not the likely scenario that you're going to ever come up with.
No,
so.
And I would also caution people, if they think, oh, I should become an entrepreneur because I want the fancy car and the jet.
Yeah.
Don't become an entrepreneur if that's the only reason.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, that goes out the window really quickly when you start facing some real friction, some real financial hardships.
Yeah.
So
let's switch to your books. I want to talk about just your first book real quick. It's called Be Unstoppable. And as I understand it, you wrote that to teach your sons these lessons. So you have 4 sons, is that right? And and you did that as a way to teach them lessons of like self-belief, this idea of an unstoppable dream realization, team building, and continuous improvement was part of that. So tell us about that first book. What were you trying to do with that first book?
In 2002, one of my good friends and close teammates was the first Navy SEAL to die in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Neil Roberts. And when you go do a deployment, they ask you to write a just-in-case letter. And a just-in-case letter is, if you come back on your shield, they have something more than a flag to give to your next of kin. I wrote 3 of them. I had 3 different platoons. And each time that my next of kin was my mom, my dad, and my brother, right? I wasn't married and I didn't have children. Neil had to write a just-in-case letter to an 18-month-old boy.
Mm. Wow.
And at the time, Jennifer was pregnant to what would be our first son. And I really wondered what Neil had written. I'd never written a letter like that. So I spent time on airplanes writing a letter to my unborn son. as a just in case letter. And then I kind of put it away. I didn't pay attention to it until she was pregnant with number 2. First one was Henry, and then Charlie came along. I wrote him a letter. And then I did it again for John, number 3. And then by the time I got to William, I was like, I'm going to try and codify this and make it more interesting than do this, don't do that kind of letters. They weren't that great. And I went on a journey to write a book that was my just in case letter to my 4 boys. That's really all it was. I was going to self-publish it. And I really kind of thought of like, well, what do I want this to be about? And what I really wanted it to be about, which is the title of the book, is I want them to be unstoppable at going after their dreams. And how do you teach that? And the way I decided to teach it in the book was to create a parable that was based on a fictitious seaside town called Up to You, where everybody's born and they receive a boat when they're born, and it's their boat for the rest of their life. And they can modify it and change it, and they can even learn how to go outside the harbor and go across the ocean, across the horizon. And they learn the master and commander's code. And that code, I make an acronym out of called You Persist, which is what I want you to do, is to keep persisting. And I ended up getting it published, and then it started getting translated into multiple languages. And that is what originally put me on the speaking circuit.
Oh, that's great. It's such a great, important message. In fact, it's, when I'm looking to hire people, I'm always looking for a story of perseverance. Tell me, when I'm interviewing people, tell me something you've overcome in your life. I want to see especially as an entrepreneur and and you have a small team, you have to have a group of people that are unstoppable, that if they come up against an obstacle, that they're trying to figure out a way how to go around it, over it, through it, under it. They're not going to be stopped dead in their tracks. And that has always been the most important characteristic as I look for employees. And that's why I tend to hire a lot of former military guys and gals for that very reason, is because
Absolutely.
they typically have been through some stuff and they've overcome it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the single most important trait there is. And, I dedicated the whole book to it and talked about these 8 actions of how to persevere, how to press on, how to not give up your ship.
Yes.
The flag behind you, which I love. I mean, that's right front and center in the rotunda at the Naval Academy. It is all about don't give up.
Don't give up. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a powerful message. Now you've kind of taken that idea of unstoppable, being an unstoppable, and creating it now for teams and leadership. So that's kind of interesting. So your latest book called Unstoppable Teams: the 4 Essential Actions of High Performance Leadership. Why did you now take it and pivot now to the leadership side of it and the team side of it?
That book took 5 years to write. The first book took 10 years to write. And as I was out on the speaking circuit, it was interesting. People at first would be like, wow, we don't really need to hear about persistence. We really need to hear about leadership. And the more I started thinking about it, I was like, actually, we have these 3 levels of leadership. And I think of it like a pebble in a pond. And the pebble is us. It's our action, right? And we're on this beautiful, crystal clear, dead calm pond. And we drop that pebble in and think of it like these 3 rings radiating out. That first ring is us. It's how we lead ourselves. That is be unstoppable. That is about the things that we can control and lead ourselves become then how we lead others, which is the second ring, which is unstoppable teams. The third ring is then the culture. Teams, there's nothing more. If you look at a team is nothing more than a reflection of its leader. A culture is nothing more than a reflection of the actions that are consistently taken by their teams. Now you could say, well, no, Alden, our culture is defined on this marble board over here in the foyer.
Yes.
No. That is an aspirational definition. The actual is what's going on day to day.
Mm.
Now, good for you. Let's close the gap between those two. So it became a natural extension of, okay, now I've helped. And by the way, the T of you persist is team up. And
Mm.
so it became a natural extension to go from be unstoppable to unstoppable teams.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now we've learned how to lead ourselves. Now let's go help and lead others.
I love that. I love the idea of these the pebble in the water, and I always think of that too as like our influence as leaders. You know, we it spreads out from us, and we do have that influence on others. And I always say that we want to leave a positive legacy versus a negative legacy. A lot of leaders leave a lot of problems in their wake, and so the idea of lead yourself first, create that the right ring, you know, and then lead your team, and then you grow out from that, and then it's the culture. I love that analogy. One of the things you say, and this is interesting, is that you say that in order to be a great team, or let's say the more you care for your teammates, the more they will dare for the team. Why? This is interesting because we don't think about caring that much. We don't talk about caring that much. But you come from a Navy SEAL perspective, an entrepreneur's perspective, and you're saying caring is powerful. Why is caring so powerful?
This is going to sound very cliche ish.
Yeah.
I don't mean it to sound this way, but I want it to stick in people's heads. Caring leads to daring.
Mm.
Why? We are born selfish. We're looking for food, water, go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We are looking at, hey, what's in it for me? There is that selfish component. Along the way, we start to realize during our journey of life, hey, selfish only gets me so far. If I'm too selfish, other people, they're not going to help me because, by the way, I can't do it all. I'm not built to do everything. I need to create a team to go after bigger and bigger goals. Like you being an entrepreneur, you couldn't create your company by yourself. You needed other people to help you to create that. Same with me and Perfect Pushup. I needed people to help me get through the Naval Academy,
Yeah.
get through the SEAL team, right? And when you start to realize that, you have to move from selfish to selfless.
Mm.
And if you know that people are already selfish, when people show up on a team, typically the first thing they're doing is, well, wait a minute, I got to take care of myself. Am I going to hit my rewards? Am I going to do the things? I got to make sure I get the good press. And if you're the leader, you're saying, hey, you don't have to worry about that. I got your back. And then now they're not focused behind their backs. They're not looking in the rearview mirror. They're like, no, Alden or John or Sally or Annie, they have proven they've got my back. I don't have to worry about
Mm.
those selfish needs. I get to think about the selfless needs of the team. And now they're not looking in the rearview mirror, they're looking forward. And if they know, think of it like climbing and you're all roped in, and maybe John or Sally is on the lead now, and they're like, "Ooh, this is a big precipice that I've got to jump across." But you know what? If I don't make it, I'm still attached to the team, and they got my back.
Mm.
I'm gonna be okay. And that propels people to do something they wouldn't typically do by themselves because they know they're supported by a bunch of other selfless teammates that are propelling them forward. And that's how we do more than we originally thought was possible. But it starts with the element of caring for each other.
It's really interesting. It's very similar. I tell very similar things in my books about this idea of caring and trust. And if you feel like your leader has your back, your teammates have your back, you're willing to stretch, you're willing to push yourself, you're willing to take risks,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
You see in the company where when everyone's afraid of making a decision because they're going to get fired or written up, everyone keeps their mouth shut and nobody takes risks, nobody takes chances, right? So you get a stagnant organization. It dies right there when you have a boss or a culture where failure is, it's a death blow, right? So everyone just, does their job, keeps their mouth shut, and they go home. And that's when innovation dies. That's when daring dies. That's when you're not able to take your business to the next level, because everyone's just, keeping their mouth shut and just doing their job and going home. And that's it's really the death of a company when that happens. So the idea of caring, and people don't, people think it's a soft term, and it's like it's a soft leadership skill, but it's really what's going to get you the hard results at the end of the day, by having these things like caring, loving, respect. These things are actually going to give you, revenue, orders, EBITDA. Those things are
Without
yeah,
question.
yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. And people will hear like, well, what does care lead to? And I'm like, oh, care squared, which is where you want to get to, is love.
Yep.
It is the highest emotion we've got, right?
Yeah.
The two basic emotions in life are love and fear. Everything else can be derived from it.
Yeah.
And what we want, and by the way, people want to be loved.
Yeah.
And if you can create an organization where people are loved and they love coming to work and they love working with customers,
Yes.
then you're going to have all those things you say. I've done a lot of work with Marriott Corporation, and they have a very simple HR policy philosophy. It's called Take Care.
Yeah.
You know what Take Care is based off of? The original mission statement of Mr. and Mrs. Marriott founders. Take care of your associates, and the associates will take care of the customers, and the customers will come back.
Yep.
95 years later, the largest hoteling company in the world is based on Take Care. That does not mean you just have to be soft and cuddly. SEAL instructors care so much that they want to make sure that you get the full benefit experience. And they don't want anything but the best to get through that training. They care. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about what you do as a speaker, trainer, coach. You're on the speaker circuit. How can people, or what can people expect if they hire you to come out and speak or do training at their company?
thank you for asking that. I speak on the 3 levels of leadership. First level, I call unstoppable mindset. Second one is unstoppable teams. And the third is unstoppable culture. I love to speak to audiences, but I do not do canned speeches. I love customizing them. So I really like to get deep in understanding what they're trying to get across, what their desired outcomes are, and they can expect me to go all in for them. I'm a storyteller at heart, and I use several frameworks that I've created over the last 35 years of leadership. And in some, I have a limited number of coaching slots that I do for executives and their C-suite.
Excellent. And how can people find out more about what you do as far as speaking and training, and all your books? How can they find that?
They can go to Alden, ALDEN -Mills, MILLS.com. And
Okay.
everything is right there at alden-mills.com.
Fantastic. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put links in the show notes for that resource. And I really encourage listeners, you're listening in and you're hearing stories about what it takes to become unstoppable. Go out and find these 2 books that he's written. And if you want to learn how to be unstoppable personally, and also with your teams and with your companies, and these are fantastic resources to help you learn from the people that have been there before you, and to have the battle scars, and they've learned the lessons. So that's the best way you can become a better leader. So Alden, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your stories, sharing these 2 books, sharing your lessons that you've learned throughout your career.
John, I'm so grateful for what you're doing with deep leadership, and I love the message you're sending. So it's an honor to be here and support you.
Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.